review the proposed 2021 road program, which is for next summer, and make a recommendation to the council. So I will turn it over to Matt Schuman, the town engineer, to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hopefully get this up and running. If there are any issues, please let me know.
Okay.
Can everyone see my screen? It says 2021 road program.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for having me here. It's certainly an unusual time to be giving a presentation, and this is my first Zoom meeting, so hopefully it will go well. We've been here many times before to talk about the road program in front of council and the Public Works Subcommittee, and there is a lot of information here. I'm providing a lot of it. Many of the councilors are already familiar with it, but folks that might listen in at home or listen in afterwards, this is good information for folks to digest. I'll start off with an update of our combined 2019-2020 road reconstruction program. Just a little bit to kind of frame our process, some pavement management goals and updates on pavement management. We'll go into the proposed 2021 road reconstruction list that we're recommending to the town council, and then I'll give you an update on our long street and collector program, which is basically Waverly Ave from from last year, and then we'll proceed with questions. We'll follow up with some questions at the end. So as the council may recall, last year we did not have a road program out to bid. The town council had approved a street list for 2019. The bids, we had few bids and not really competitive pricing. There was a follow-up joint Public Works Subcommittee and Board of Fiscal Oversight Committee where it was decided that we would combine and have two road programs going simultaneously this year. So subsequently last fall, August, September, we brought forth the 2020 road program. That subsequently went out to bid in December. We as discussed at the previous meetings, we put out two contracts. So we called it phase 1 and phase 2, but essentially it's the 2019 and 2020 road programs are put out as two separate contracts. It turns out that Onyx Corporation won both of them. They were the apparent low bidders and they were awarded the project. Work began in the middle of the fray in April when everything was a little hectic, but they have had two crews in town working consistently since then. I'm going to go through just a brief update. I won't go through every street individually, but I've listed here the streets that are completed: Avon Road, Chandler Street, Burnham Street, Bridgham Ave, Piermont Street, Tappan Ave, and Bartlett Street. I do want to point out that even though I'm saying they're completed, you should consider them, say, 99% complete or, essentially substantially complete. There are items that still need to get done. There will be some line painting that goes in, say, stop bars or crosswalks. Tree plantings will be done in the fall. And there might be, as there are on any project, some items that maybe fell through the cracks or didn't get addressed. So the town will go through with the contractor, walk the sites, and look at any deficiencies or defects that need to be addressed, which is called a punch list. But essentially, these streets have been completed to date. We have two streets going on concurrently right now with our two crews. We have Bellevue Road going on and Kimball Road going on as well. They both have curb and sidewalks going in at the same time. The roads that you've probably recently seen have been brought to binder grade. They've had the reclamation process done and put in the first coat of asphalt are Frank and Louise Street, Nichols Ave, and Downey Street. Now, I didn't want to, I'll say I'm being very conservative in what I'm putting out here because I don't want to give, make promises that don't happen, but I will say that the contractor is very interested in getting all of these streets completed this year. That said, We are entering into October. We've had an unseasonably dry season, which has allowed us to continue to work. If we have issues with rain, weather delays, and other things, they may not be able to get to all of these streets. Right now, the next street they plan on going to is Frank and Louise Street. They'll probably be there probably second, third week of October as one of the crews finishes up on Kimball and Bellevue. When the next crew finishes up, we'll evaluate how much time we have left, and we will decide either to go to Nichols Ave or Downey Street, depending. Nichols Ave is a little bit more intensive. It's a longer street. There's more work to do. And provided we continue to have good weather and it's a mild fall, they plan to keep going as long as they can, and there is the potential for Downey Street to get completed this year. In the event that these streets cannot be completed this year, steps will be taken to make them safe for pedestrians and for roadway users prior to the end of the season, and they will be back in the spring to continue. And
Matt,
Yep.
you say these are going to be done. But you have some work done already on them.
Yes. So all of the binder work has been complete. So there's the first coat of asphalt is down. The next step would be to do curb and sidewalks. So right now we're just watching the weather for whether, curb and sidewalk can proceed. There is a cutoff date for sidewalks around November 15th. I did want to point out, I wasn't able to include it on the slides, but we have been providing what we call 3-week look-aheads, which are on our website, and there will be a link at the very end under the annual road program. So if we have been telling residents, if they have a question, take a look at the 3-week look-aheads. They give you a general sense. Obviously in 3 weeks things can change, but it gives you a general sense of how the work is proceeding. Also, the council may be aware that on a weekly basis, we've been updating the homepage of our DPW webpage with a little bit more detailed information about the work that's going to go forward. And of course, that supplements any resident notifications that go out per our typical process. Wheeler Lane, we've had a little bit of a delay with Wheeler Lane this year. We got into a rather complicated gas main project on Riverside Street and Wheeler Lane that have impacted some sewer work and our ability to proceed. But the contractor is still willing and interested in doing Wheeler Lane. It will be done in the spring. And this is consistent with the past couple of years where we start a project with multiple streets and we sometimes carry over to the next year to finish up. I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of highlight some of the work that we do, and particularly how it ties in with some of the other town council priorities and objectives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about green streets and complete streets. Some of you are familiar with our green streets from our Edenfield Ave project a couple of years ago. That was fairly successful in terms of managing stormwater and providing enhanced stormwater quality improvements and reducing the amount of stormwater in our systems through stormwater tree trenches. And I apologize, I don't have the final, an installed picture here, but you can see on the right a picture of a tree trench being installed. You'll see the concrete structure there being the catch basin, and the little white pipe with the holes in it surrounded by the crushed stone is the pipe that allows the water to percolate into the soil. So instead of going right into our storm drain, there's a certain amount of our stormwater that will actually enter into the ground. It gets filtered. It removes pollutants such as phosphorus, sediment, bacteria. And in the case of a heavy rain where maybe it's too much water for this system to handle, there's an overflow that goes back into our drainage system. And between the two road programs combined, we have 12 stormwater tree trenches installed. Along those lines, in terms of complete streets and green streets, I wanted to point out something that we've been doing over the past couple of years in terms of working around trees when we need to. As you can see on the left, we try and avoid impacts to trees wherever possible. In these instances, we actually bumped, it's almost a reverse bump out where we reversed the sidewalk around the tree as opposed to being behind the tree where we'd have more impacts. And it provides for a continuous sidewalk while also protecting the trees. Obviously, tree protection always comes up during our projects, and you can see in the middle we have our tree protection on our tree. We've also pulled back the sidewalk a little bit while maintaining our ADA requirements to give the tree a little bit more breathing room. And then of course on the right we have our tree canopy. As I mentioned, we're not finished with tree plantings on our 19 and 20 road program. Those will be included in some of the tree plantings this fall. And of course the planting strips, as you see a lot of before and after pictures where we've had paved borders or no curb to offer protection for pedestrians, we are adding those in. And then further, kind of the kitchen sink here, ADA compliance, making sure that we're aware of resident needs for ADA impacts, as well as ADA compliant sidewalks, handicap ramps, filling in the gaps in the network. Many streets that we have been doing over the past couple of years don't have complete sidewalks or lack sidewalks completely or have gaps, and we attempt to fill those in. And then on the left, you can see this is the intersection of Burnham and Chandler. We've pulled the intersection in a little bit or out a little bit to tighten it up. And that allows us to have better pedestrian accommodations in terms of having shorter crossing distances. Also allows us a little more green space and reduce impervious area. So, and I apologize for kind of blowing through this really quickly, and I'm happy to take questions as they go along or at the end. But I'm going to transition a little bit now and discuss sort of our pavement management goals, what we look at when we're looking at our road program, trying to develop it, and some of the other methods that we use for pavement preservation. And then we'll get into the recommendations. So as I discuss, every year, we try and take a holistic view of pavement preservation so that we're not just coming to council with roads in the poorest shape. We're also looking at roads that need maintenance, and we're doing preventative maintenance on roads as we go. We're also looking ahead towards utility needs, working with the gas company every year, working with our utility division to make sure water and sewer improvements or drainage improvements are done prior to paving a street, so that we hopefully don't have to go back and dig it up afterwards. And as the council is aware, we also look to comply with our complete streets policy, improve pedestrian and bicycle connections as we can, and seek other funding sources for projects such as the $289,000 Complete Streets grant that we received for work that was done this year. Just a little bit more background. The council's aware we had our last pavement management plan was developed in 2016. We are a little behind with COVID in terms of getting the 2020 study completed, but it is underway and we are in the process of reviewing that. You can see that we've made quite a bit of progress comparing our backlog from 2012 to 2016, and I imagine that will look better in 2020, considering the significant amount of rehabilitation and reconstruction that we've done over the past 4 or 5 years. And I also just want to point out, because we do have our pavement condition map that we've discussed, that, and again, this is from 2016, it's a little bit outdated, that this is rated from 0 to 100, where 0 is kind of in the poorest condition, and 100 would be a fresh road. We use this is relative. It's, a 20 versus a 21 is somewhat subjective, but it gives you a relative idea of the shape of roads in town. And again, this is from 2016, doesn't reflect recent upgrades. And again, just to get into the pavement preservation versus road reconstruction, we use a variety of pavement preservation techniques that the council is made aware of during the course of the year when the work begins. In terms of limited mill and overlay repairs, the superintendent liked to call that our 300 to 500 foot section work, where we're not necessarily looking at a complete street or a complete road rehabilitation, but we're taking the worst sections of a road and we're trying to bring them up into better shape so that we can preserve and prolong the life before it needs a full reconstruction. Same thing with full depth patch. We do go around town and we look at sunken trenches, areas that might have had work done, where we have significant potholes over time, and we do permanent patch. Again, that's to kind of lift the overall state of the road to prevent it having to have full reconstruction. And then crack sealing, which to be honest, we have not done a lot of in the past couple of years, but that's kind of your first line of attack to kind of, when you have cracks, fill them in to prevent water from getting into the roadway surface and causing further deterioration. And you can see at the chart, or the chart below kind of gives you an idea that, this is, when we're talking about pavement preservation and pavement reconstruction, we're looking at the surface of the road and we're looking at the cost of resurfacing a road. So it pays to do preservation versus letting the roads deteriorate to the point where they need full reconstruction. Now, of course, the reason why most of us are here today is to talk about kind of our full reconstruction program, which is reclamation, which is basically digging up the road, what we call pulverizing it, grinding it up, getting a new base, putting a whole new set of asphalt down, along with curb and sidewalks. So again, I just want to point out, because the questions do come up, and I know council from constituents and certainly DPW from residents of, well, you did X, why didn't you do Y and Z? Or you're out there doing a patch, well, why aren't you doing down the street? Or why aren't you doing the sidewalk? Or a litany of other things. And I just want to reiterate, and I know it's difficult for folks to understand, that when we're doing when we're using preservation techniques, we are very limited in the scope of work. If we're doing a mill and overlay, we're looking to mill and overlay the road. A permanent patch is a permanent patch. There are definitive scopes and there are definitive limits. It's not something where we necessarily go in and do all of the curb and the sidewalk and other items that we may do during a full reconstruction. So again, this is just another summary. I've already discussed the pavement management techniques. I do want to let you know there is a link at the bottom of the slide that gives you a little bit more information on the highway department website of what some of these methods are and when we use them. Road reconstruction. So as I mentioned, road reconstruction, talking with Cambridge about some projects they do, they call mill and overlay a facelift. So, road reconstruction is not a facelift, it's a reconstructive surgery, I suppose. This is a process where we are putting in a full 4 inches of asphalt versus, say, 1.5 inches that we'd be putting in on a mill and overlay. We'd be putting in a new base. So underneath that pavement, you need to have good compacted gravel to make sure that the road can take the weight of the traffic above it. So we're addressing that. And in accordance with the town council policies and rules and ordinances, we install granite curbing, concrete sidewalks, driveway aprons, and handicap ramps. We often are adding in a planting strip if it's not there or if it's paved over. We review driveway openings for compliance with zoning, and meaning we walk the streets with the zoning enforcement agent and they make decisions as to how driveway openings should be handled. And as I discussed with our tree trenches, we do look at stormwater management, nutrient control, meeting other goals, and trying to tie in a complete, again, a complete street when we're doing a full reconstruction. And for the reason we're sitting here today, we do provide the council a recommendation of lists that the subcommittee then reviews and hopefully recommends to the council for full review and approval. Just in terms of tracking where we've been, every year we like to look at the last 5 years of work that's been performed for that overall progress. We've had 7 miles of roadway reconstructed since 2016. Now that's going to combine not just the road program, which the council has generously funded for longer than I've been here, but also our Complete Streets projects, our, as you recall, our Hosmer Safe Routes to School project, and various contributions from developers. So how do we develop the list that we are coming to you today to recommend? As we discussed before, we have a pavement management plan and a pavement management inventory. We have a general sense of what's a 0 and what's a 100 in town. That definitely gives us a good starting point. We do windshield surveys year round, and particularly after the winter, to see how the roads have fared over the past year, to see if some roads seem to deteriorate faster than others. We tie into our capital projects and make sure that we're not proposing to do a street that our water department's going to want to do a water main on, or likewise that the gas company is going to say they need to do gas main on. And no one believes me when I say it, but I say it every year. We do consider resident input. That does give us a heads up of areas to look at. Certainly, the roads are the roads, and we need to be objective amongst the 72 plus or minus miles of road. But when we get resident input, we do look, and it may not be that a road is in need of full reconstruction, but we may go out and say it needs a permanent patch, or there's a section that needs a mill and overlay. But those things are definitely considered as we go along. Also, again, things I kind of say every year, but the roads are the roads. The greatest state of disrepair are the roads in the greatest state of disrepair. That kind of dictates to an extent what the program is. We always look at our funding constraints. As I mentioned, the town council has generously been funding us for, I know Councilor Picciarelli will know, but I've been here for 6 years, and I know it's been longer than that, and we've made a lot of progress, but we do select a program that meets within those constraints. And again, we're looking at our funding sources, where we can do preventative maintenance in a little bit of geographic equity. Again, the roads are the roads, but we want to make sure that the whole town is being addressed and that we're not just focusing on one area in particular. So just as we develop this year's program, looking at some of the work that's been performed, I have the work here for this year, our water main replacement program that will be wrapping up in the next couple of weeks. I also have National Grid streets. I like to provide you with the footage or miles of National Grid streets that were reconstructed or rehabilitated. I didn't get to do that this year, but I've listed a short list. I think there are even more. National Grid has been an excellent partner working with us on looking at what our needs are, future needs, and looking at what their needs are, and having a cooperative effort to make sure the infrastructure is upgraded before we're going in and doing any road programs. So with all that said, I'll present to you our list, and as I do every year, I'll provide you a little bit more background as to why we chose these streets as we move forward. Alden Road, located off of Belmont Street. This is a short dead end near the country club. This I believe, and again, this is before my time, but I believe had previously, way back, been presented for reconstruction, but there were issues with the gas main not being replaced at the time. Subsequently, the gas main's been replaced, and in just this year, we've done some sewer and drain repairs. You can also see just from the photos, the condition of the road really lends itself to reconstruction. It's you can see what we call alligator cracks, which are those kind of little lines. You could, particularly on the right, you can just see the multiple cracks and the multiple trench repairs that we have from the utility upgrades. Alden Road is 30 feet wide. It's a wider right-of-way than most of our streets. It's 50 feet wide, a 50-foot wide road right-of-way, and I want the council to be aware of that. Sheldon Road is located just next to Alden Road. This is a similar situation. I think it may have been brought forth previously, but the gas main repairs had not been done. So we've taken the same approach. We've had the gas main's been replaced. They're actually finishing up services as we speak and should be wrapped up next week, the gas services. We've had sewer and drain repairs done over the past year, and it's in very similar condition to Alden Road, as you can see in the photos. Hazel Street. This is a short section of Hazel Street between Quimby Street and Dexter Ave, kind of in the east end. It's had significant repairs done. The gas main and the water main were replaced in 2016. The road is in a similar state of disrepair. It had suffering from multiple trenches. You can kind of see in the photos where the gas trench is, the water trench is, and in some areas we have some buckling of the pavement, so it's very uneven. Gertrude Street, the gas main here was replaced in 2017. This road is in very poor condition. You can actually see, in addition to the alligator cracking, what we call macadam, which is kind of probably what they originally paved the road with, a very coarse stone that sometimes they put asphalt emulsion on. But to me indicates that there's very little pavement there. So, you know, again, in terms of pavement preservation, I couldn't do a mill and overlay here because there isn't anything to mill. There's very little pavement. Goldie Street, somewhat similar situation. Back when Waverly Ave was done in 2011, the water main was also replaced at that time. The gas main was replaced in 2017. You can see in the photos, particularly on the right, that there are gaps in the sidewalk network. Now, I do want to point out for Goldie Street, and certainly we're not at the point where we have detailed concepts developed, but you can see on the picture on the left, a very big slope, and you can sort of see it on the right as well. That may prohibit a continuous sidewalk on the right, on the left, depends what side you're looking at, on the south side of the street. Because of the need for walls, utility, you can see a utility pole that could be an issue. So that's something that we would look forward to when we develop a more detailed design. We'd bring that forth with our Complete Streets Working Group and make sure folks were comfortable with that. But the goal, nevertheless, would be to have at least one continuous sidewalk on one side of the street. Elmwood Ave, very similar to the Gertrude Street, where you can actually, on the right, you can see the macadam sort of sticking through where it's been patched. Another relatively wide street that had the gas main replaced in 2017. Grandview Ave, this is the section of Grandview Ave between Chapman Street and Copeland Street, sort of behind the Cunniff School. You can see on the left side, the gas main patch where the gas main was replaced, looking at the left photo. I do want to point out here, the desire is going to be to provide a continuous sidewalk on both sides, given the proximity to the school. However, that does need further analysis. I do also want to point out, you know, this is a great time to be replacing the street. That's not lost on us, with the Cunniff School not occupied right now due to construction. And I also just want to point out, I did reach out to Tom Finnegan, who is the construction owner's project manager for the town, just to get his input. Would we be interfering with the Cunniff project if we were to do a project on the back of Grandview Ave? And he said that based on their access, that there wouldn't be an issue. And certainly when we get to construction, we would keep them in the loop to make sure that we don't have any issues going forward. So next steps, as typical, as we typically discuss, provided that the subcommittee and town council approve our recommendations, we will start to get our concept plans together. We will go through our reviews with community development and planning in terms of driveway openings. We have a new tree warden starting on Monday, as the council's aware, which is great news for us. We'll be able to walk the streets with him and identify any issues with existing trees or proposed tree locations. We'll look to improve our substandard water services or fire hydrants if those are needed, our green infrastructure review. supplemental survey. I have had discussions with our consultants. As you know, last year we came to you, and I think mid to late August, so we're a little bit later than we were last year. But he has indicated that we should be able to maintain a schedule for December bid based on all the information that's been put forward. You know, there's a lot of behind the scenes work in terms of getting estimates together, et cetera. That should not be an issue for us. I do, and we'll get back to the list at the end, but I do want to give you an update on our Long Streets and Collector program. As you know, in FY19, the town council appropriated or approved in the budget $1.5 million supplemental for Long Streets and Collector programs. Subsequently, last year, we came forward to the council and recommended Waverly Ave as being the first street in this program that the council approved. We are a little bit behind. I admit COVID kind of got in the way of going as quickly as we wanted to. And again, I'm just for the benefit of folks, in addition to the council approving it, this was in our Complete Streets prioritization plan. You can see what the scope was at that time. And I've included a link to the full plan at the bottom if folks want to take a look at it. But we have made some progress, not as much progress as we'd like, but we did consider complete a land survey earlier. We reviewed the driveways with zoning enforcement, although given how early on in the project we have not made any notifications yet. We have looked at kind of some roadway alternatives to try and see what a road cross section would look like. And we have about 8 water services that are substandard, meaning the town standard is now 1-inch copper. If a service is iron or 3/4 inch copper, we'll typically upgrade it prior to doing the road, again, to make sure that we don't have to dig the road up afterwards. So that work will be completed this fall in order to get ahead of the schedule next year. So our next steps will be to develop a concept plan for review by the Complete Streets Working Group, and we'll look to be in substantial conformance with what was in the Complete Streets plan, prioritization plan. We'll do our typical abutter notifications, get plans together, and look to bid in winter for construction next year. Again, I had a conversation with our consultant. I expect that we'll be able to do this in line with December, in line with what we did this past year. But I'm going to say winter to give me a little extra time. If we go into January, I don't think that will affect the number of bids or bid prices, but the goal is to try and do it in December. So again, I would like to provide our summary of our recommendations to the Town Council Subcommittee for the 2021 road program. And I know the committee likes to see them geographically sometimes. So I've also provided them on this slide geographically. There is another slide after that says questions, but I'll go back to this because I'm sure folks will have them. And I can stop sharing my screen, I guess.
Okay, Matt. And there was just one other document that you had given us, which was the memo about the sidewalk and street maintenance work that was done.
Yes, Counselor. I don't have that on my screen set up. I can try and find it if you'd like, but I did see some.
Yeah, I could share that. I have it open on my screen.
Okay.
I just if you want to just because this comes up every year. Well, what do we do for the other you know, like the 300-foot mill and overlay stuff? So do you want to cover that now? Does the committee want to just hear from that now before we go on to questions and discussion? Just so we have everything in one place.
I think that makes sense.
All right. So
So do I stop
Yeah,
share?
if you stop sharing it, then I can share it and just show that. Can people see that?
It says yes.
All right, so can everybody see that? So this was sort of what's been done this past year. So I'll leave that there. And if you, Matt, if you just want to talk to that.
Sure. So on the left is our list of our pavement maintenance, as I was kind of talking about in terms of rehabilitation, preservation. We have our crack sealing, our trench patch, and our mill and overlay. I didn't give you an exhaustive list of each repair, but this is kind of the main crux of the work, our mill and overlay maintenance. It gives you a good idea. I think we made pretty good progress on our mill and overlay contract this year. In some ways, we were fortunate with COVID, and I hate to say that, but a lot of other communities had stopped working or stopped their contractors in, say, March, April, and we had contractors interested in coming and working in Watertown, and Watertown stayed open, as you're aware. Also, with less traffic, we were able to get on some of the main streets that are difficult for us to get to. So you'll see, for example, Walnut Street, sections of Arsenal Street, not listed here specifically, sections of Watertown Square. We did some mill and overlay. And we also hit some of those residential streets where doing a pavement preservation helps extend the life of the road versus having it kind of reduce down to a road reconstruction project. And then on the right, just a list of our sidewalk repair. And again, we had a little bit of luck getting our sidewalk contractor into town this year. We made pretty good efforts. And again, we were able to focus on some of the main thoroughfares, Belmont Street near Circuit Lane, Spring Street were some areas. And then you can also see in some instances on larger streets, what we're trying to do is, and again, this is kind of in line with our complete streets policy, if we're doing a road rehabilitation, mill and overlay, also looking to do sidewalk work. So for example, Cross Street, we did sidewalk rehabilitation, and we also did a mill and overlay. Spring Street, we did a sidewalk repair from, it says from Main Street to, well, we did do from Main Street from Palfrey Street to Palfrey Street, but most of the work was actually from Summer Street to Palfrey Street. But with the idea that eventually we can go in and mill and overlay that section of Spring Street, as it is in quite a state of disrepair, but is eligible for a mill and overlay. So I hope that provides some context for that list, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure. And so Tony, we'll attach to the minutes, we'll attach both the PowerPoint presentation plus the memo. So if you just make a note in the minutes that both be attached. I'm going to stop sharing that. All right. So the going back to so committee, the committee members have any questions? Anthony.
Matt, I was wondering if you could just talk to, because I know this came up with regard to Eden Field a couple years ago, and then Piermont Street during this last construction season, where, with resident concerns about whether or not narrowing the street prevents or impedes, police and fire. Can you just kind of speak to the process that DPW goes through to make sure that both the Watertown Police and the fire?
Absolutely. Can I share my screen again?
Yes, go ahead, Matt.
Pardon my ignorance technologically right now, but let's. So every year when we present our road program to the Public Works Subcommittee, you will see we list the length of the street and the width of the street. Here we have Elmwood Ave, 33 feet. Grandview Ave, 23 feet, 6 inches. Now, obviously that's plus or minus a couple of inches, but I did go out and review these road widths. There's a lot of confusion sometimes with residents. The curb makes the road look a lot narrower than it is. So when I come to you and I say the road's 23 feet, 6 inches wide, or 33 feet wide, typically we'll be matching the current width. Now, the town policy, if you go into the curb and sidewalk policy for a residential street, the curb and sidewalk ordinance for a residential street, typically 24 feet is the typical road width. And that accounts for a 10-foot travel lane and 2 7-foot parking lanes. And certainly Councilor Picciarelli I think he helped write the ordinance, so he knows a lot more of the background. But that's been established and it's been reviewed by the subcommittee several times. It's also worked with police and fire. You had mentioned Edenfield Ave. That was a slightly separate, different type of project where we did a roadway narrowing, and we did have a public process. The road was narrowed. I want to say it was about 32 feet wide before. It was narrowed down to 26 feet wide. Still wider than a typical 24-foot wide road, but probably certainly narrower than what folks were used to having lived on the street. But again, there was a public process with that was reviewed with police and fire, as are every streets. We do sometimes get questions, and I do want to point out Piermont Street was 24-foot wide before. If you look back at our previous presentations, you'll see that it was noted that it was 24 feet wide. Sometimes you'll see 23 feet 6 inches. Now, these are ones where our goal is to get a 24-foot wide road. If we're able to widen it a little bit, we'll try. But as even out here, you can see on the right trees in the way, it might not be possible to do it. Depending on the street, we use a little bit of judgment, and we'll work with the transportation planner to see if any parking restrictions might be required. And we also look for resident feedback on that. I think, parking is a touchy issue in town. There's a lot of demand for it. We don't want to take away parking, but we also want to be respectful of police and fire needs and plow needs and everyone's needs to get up and down the road. So that's something that we look at when it's less than 24 foot wide on a case by case basis.
And Vinny, if I could, just one more. And I think you alluded to it, Matt, when you were talking about Goldie Street, but I do think it's also important just for residents to know that although the ideal is to reconstruct the street and put the sidewalks in on both sides, that may not always necessarily be the case. I'm also thinking about when we redid Everett Ave and in certain areas, sidewalks. So, I just think it's good to assure residents that we're not just going to force the full width sidewalk on them if it's something that street cannot.
Thank you. I agree with that. And in our resident notification letters that we send out, we do try and come up with a concept. We do try and show if there won't be a sidewalk or will be a sidewalk. But I have to admit, sometimes there are cases where we get out there and we didn't think we could put one in, and then we get out there during construction and actually, hey, well, maybe we can get one in, like you saw on some of the earlier pictures for Everett or Chandler Street. We went around in front of trees instead of not having a sidewalk or having to go behind trees and have impacts. So there is a little bit of give and take, but we do try and give folks as much information as we can beforehand. And certainly we started doing notification letters in, I want to say 2017 or 18, and that's also a learning process for us. And as we go forward, we try and learn, what information and what information we should provide, and try and provide as accurate information as we can beforehand.
And I guess just one last comment. I want to acknowledge, specifically, I'm thinking about Piermont Street because there was a lot of concern on the street about the project. I want to just credit and acknowledge both DPW and Steve Magoon's department I know on numerous occasions, either Jerry or Steve or out and met with residents to about individual, whether or not there was anything that could be done to address those. W and Steve's department for doing that.
Okay. Tony, did you have any questions? Okay. Let's open it up to the public then. If anybody else would like to ask a question, just use the raise your hand. And if anybody else wants to speak, Lisa.
Hi, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, it's fine.
Thanks. Good to see our town engineer, Matt Schuman. Thanks for your presentation. I have so many questions because I feel like there are so many things and it's so rare for us to get time with you. So I hope people will bear with me. Some of them I'm sure will have short answers. And I just want to make note for an advocacy point of view that Chester Street, my understanding, the water and sewer was done in 2013, the gas in 2015. And, you know, residents have been told for a long time that the road would be redone after that. And so here you are, you know, like 5 years later, plus. I think it was around the same time as Hovey and Edenfield. And the sidewalks are truly terrible with no curbing. So I'm hoping that Chester Street could get back on the radar.
Yeah, we'll take that under advisement.
And then I had a question about Walnut Street. People were kind of surprised. I thought that more improvements were coming because of Athena Health with Walnut. Could you explain a little bit, or is that like on a complete streets path or potential bike lane or just?
I'm not entirely sure which, there are a couple of projects on Walnut Street. I can't speak to all of them.
Okay.
I know Athena had presented improvements at the intersection of Walnut School and Dexter. Unfortunately, I can't give you an update on that. That I certainly could check in with Mr. Magoon on the status of that. You're also aware from the development at Doble, 85 Walnut Street. They had recommended, or excuse me, they had committed to a number of improvements on Walnut Street in terms of bump outs and pedestrian improvements, I believe at Lincoln Street, the existing park, and at Cypress Street. And again, I can't speak to all the details of that. I understand the project was approved, but I don't have any information as to the timeline of their doing construction. The section of Walnut Street that we mill and overlaid is outside of all of those work areas. So that is something that we considered when we looked at the work limits for that. But unfortunately, I would recommend maybe checking in with the planning department to see what the status is of those two projects.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate I know with Spruce Street, the crumbling asphalt curbs and whatnot. So people were just wondering, but I know you don't, like you said, you don't have a lot of info, but could you remind me, I know there was concern on Russell Ave. Was there, I don't think an alternative to granite curbing went in. Was that green strip taken care of there near Mount Auburn Street at the corner, kind of at Broadway? And
so actually I have a photo. My mill and overlay photo is from and you know, this is the tricky thing for us as Public Works. You know, we have a mill and overlay contract. We have berm that was put in a while ago. It's very difficult to maintain. It's very difficult to repair. I definitely feel the residents' pain. But as we committed to, we did loam seed the border. We also put down do not park on the border signage. I know the resident was very concerned about the border and parking on the border. And I know this comes to DPW and also as well counselors in terms of just border maintenance. Working with the park supervisor, we're looking to get a hydro seeder so that when we're doing our loam and seed borders repairs as we do, that we're also able to hydro seed them to help establish the grass and prevent erosion, because particularly on our slopes, you'll see erosion happen after the soil's bare.
Oh, great. That's good to hear that you're looking for that. I know that the signs, we don't really have any instructions for residents of the signs, if they, could be recycled with DPW or what kind of a.
Certainly, if folks, don't want to throw them out and want them to be reused, if they were dropped off here, we'd certainly take them back and reuse them. They're also available if a resident sees them around town and wants to pick them up. Any resident can come by our office and pick some up if they want to use them. We're trying to get into the habit of when we have a work order to reloam and seed a border that we're putting the signage in kind of de facto. But, I know, again, DPW and council get a number of requests or concerns about borders, and all that information, or all those signs are available here. And I do want to remind the council as well, and anyone listening, we do have a guide to the planting strip brochure that is on our website. I didn't include the link here, but I can certainly provide that if necessary. It also provides some hints on how to maintain a border.
Thank you. And it's great to see Alden Road. I know we haven't voted yet, and, no final decisions, but yeah, that's long in the coming, and interesting that it is 30 feet wide. So hopefully people will be happy about that when the curbs go in. I guess one question, since we already voted on Waverly Ave, I thought that we would be identifying another street. Am I off in my timing for the longer connector collector road?
So
Can I interrupt just a second?
Yeah, go
Matt,
ahead.
can you just raise your voice a little bit? I'm having trouble.
Okay, I'm sorry. The screen is saying, please move this window away from, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to move closer or further away, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was remiss in pointing out, and thank you for noting it. We are a little bit behind in Waverly Ave. At this time, we have not brought forward an additional street for the town council to consider, because we expect that Waverly Ave will be under construction next year. That notwithstanding, there's certainly flexibility for us to look at 2 streets in the following year, or to look at a larger project. Even some of our long streets and collectors estimates, when you start looking at traffic calming and some of the enhanced treatments, could exceed the $1.5 million appropriation. So that's certainly not lost on us, and we know that the council is interested and has been, it was very helpful to fund the first $1.5 million, and we haven't lost sight of that. But I do apologize at this time, being behind on Waverly Ave, we haven't brought forth another street.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was just hopeful that, maybe we could be looking at a placeholder. I guess I'll just put a plug in for Morse Street, because I thought Morse and Galen gas was done around 2014, but Morse is really terrible. And as you know, the only connection there between Galen and Watertown, it has a lot of pedestrian and handicapped and disabled children, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go on about that.
Certainly, as you know from last year, Highland Ave and Moore Street were kind of on the short list. So certainly, as we go forward, more streets will be added to the short list, but other streets will be funded, and Moore Street is a priority.
Okay, and can you clarify? So you have Riverside Street and Irving Street as National Grid, meaning once they finish their upgrades, you think that they'll get on the schedule for this within this year or next construction season?
Since you've asked the question, I'll provide a council with an update on some of the restoration that National Grid has to do on some of the large streets that
Yeah.
they've worked on. Irving Street, as you're aware, National Grid has been working for the past couple of months upgrading the gas main on Irving Street. At this point, we expect to go in next year and perform a mill and overlay on Irving Street, at least from Mount Auburn Street to Arsenal Street. Looking at the condition of the road and looking at sort of long-term plans, Irving Street probably does not have sufficient asphalt on it right now, and to do a full reclamation of the project of the street would probably bump it into a long street and collector street type project of $1 million to $1.5 million. We also have had discussions with MWRA. They have a water main that runs from the city of Newton under the river up Irving.
Yeah.
They have not given us definitive answers on what their plans are to do with that, and we don't want to be premature in doing a full reconstruction of the street, only to have that said, the road is in horrible condition.
Sorry.
We definitely understand that, and we're sensitive to it, and not just from a road user. Council may be aware there are concerns from some bicyclists that use that street as well. Mill and overlay, again, is a preservation technique. It gets us more time. It's not meant to mill and overlay it and never come back, but it allows us to at least get the roadway surface in line so that it lasts until MWRA figures out what they want to do, and we're able to fund the full reconstruction. That said, I also will give you an update on Lexington Street. Lexington Street, another street that that National Grid has worked on for a long time. Lower Lexington Street from Warren Street down to Main Street, and then even further from Main Street to Acton Street. They did restoration earlier this year. They are finishing up all of the gas work. It was a very long, extended project. Should be complete next week. We're going to take a similar stance. We're going to let the road settle over the winter. We're going to come back and mill and overlay from Warren Street up to Belmont Street. They also had the extension on Belmont Street to the town of Belmont. That was done earlier this year. And National Grid has generously agreed to fund that work for us. So that will be at no cost to the town, but that will wait till until the spring to just allow the road to settle. I also, Lexington Street's very similar in condition to Irving Street, where if we were to do a full reconstruction, we're looking at significant costs for getting the proper amount of asphalt onto the street. We talked about doing 4 inches of asphalt on our residential streets. A street like Irving Street or Lexington Street is going to be looking at 7 inches of asphalt, and maybe even a little bit more, just because it has a higher vehicular volume and has higher weights on the streets. So that allows us to, again, make the road passable, make it safe, and a better driving experience while we await a larger project. And then just to give you an update on Belmont Street at Duff Street. As you're probably aware from the grant location, National Grid will be putting in an urban sidewalk on the north side of Belmont Street from Duff Street, tying into the school. That's names I'm forgetting, but I believe it's 917 Belmont Street. They had put curb in a while back, so that will
The Walker School, man.
Yes, thank you. That will tie in there. They'll also mill and overlay the section of road that they've disturbed there, and they'll be improving the handicap ramp on Belmont Street at Duff Street. And then with regards to Templeton Parkway, that they just finishing up the regulator pit, they had curb and sidewalk that's been repaired. We'll assess the road condition to see if any further repairs are necessary based on the level of work that they've done. So I hope that helps answer your question. A long way.
No, that's super helpful, but I was wondering about Riverside Street.
Oh,
Um, just we have a lot of well, I don't know if lot's the right word, but we have a blind, handicapped residents, et cetera. And I know with the delays in Wheeler Ave, so if you could speak to that.
so Riverside Street, again, as I mentioned, we provide our priorities to National Grid. National Grid provides their priorities to us. They were doing a repair on Riverside Ave at Wheeler Lane. They found their gas main to be in significantly deteriorated condition to the point where they couldn't make connections to it. They extended the limit of work up to North Beacon Street and then a little bit further down Riverside Street to number 50. At this time, Grant, I should point out, Grandview Ave, Eldon Road, Sheldon Road, roads that we've put forth this year, although they're listed as the gas main. They're listed as the gas main with these other streets. Those streets were essentially complete way earlier this season. Riverside Street was not. Similarly with Essex, Nash, Pine, and Oak. We didn't want to prematurely suggest a street to be redone and then find out for some reason that they didn't finish. So it really wasn't considered this year, but it certainly will be considered in subsequent years, and will certainly be balanced in terms of road condition, geographic equity, and all the other things that we consider when we develop the road program.
Well, I guess honestly, my main concern really is for pedestrians, and I know you showed what was done so far with sidewalks. I don't know, temporarily, we've kind of gone back and forth if asphalt sidewalks are going to receive attention or replaced with concrete, et cetera. So I don't know if you could speak to sidewalk expectations or not.
Certainly. I do want to point out that the list that Councilor Picciarelli put on the screen before for sidewalk repair in my memo, that I do want to point out that was about $800,000 worth of sidewalk repairs. It encompassed year's repairs and a carryover from last year. So, this is a whole other conversation for another time, but sidewalks have gotten expensive. And if the town is looking to improve sidewalks, outside of a road reconstruction program or to do a wholesale improvement of asphalt to concrete, et cetera, that should be discussed in terms of funding and maybe adding some more funding to that. I hope the town manager is not listening in as I mentioned that. I do also want to point out, since you mentioned it, in addition to our pavement management plan, we are looking at a sidewalk condition map. It's sort of TBD as to how.
Yay!
It's but yeah, you're also aware that the planning department is working on a bike ped plan, but we're also looking at that ourselves to see what the overall condition of sidewalks are and to help us in our priorities.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm really sorry. I only have a couple more.
Okay, yeah, just because the two other people want to speak, so that's why I just wanted.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead, Lisa. Just go. I just didn't.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
It's great to see I think you called them stormwater trenches, 12 installed. I don't know if it's on the DPW website. I'd be curious to know where they are. You don't have to tell me now if we can find them.
So I don't have them listed on the website, but if you go to, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for the slide here. If you go onto the website under stormwater, I believe it's stormwater management, there are tabs at the bottom that discuss, what a catch basin is, what an outfall is. We did add something for green infrastructure, and there is some information there. I can tell you of the 12, I don't have the, I'm sorry, I'm kind of just flipping through the slides. I don't need to, but there were, I think, 4 or 5 on Frank and Louise Street, 5 or 6 on Piermont Streets, 1 on Chandler Street, 1 on Burnham Street at Manly Way, not Manly Way, Mangano Court, and 1 on Loomis Street at Downey. So there are, there's a whole separate investigation. They need to, the soils need to be conducive to having them. So as part of our investigations in terms of green infrastructure, we'll kind of dig into the soil and figure out where they'll work. We'll look at utilities. For example, Kimball Road we looked at, looked great. Then we dug a hole and there was ledge. We couldn't put one in. So a lot goes into it, but where we're choosing streets that are conducive to it, I think we're making good progress.
Okay, and then I know that, well, our planting strip, the costs for those improvements or plans rolled into when you're doing sidewalk repair outside of the roads program, or is that something that we're going to learn about from the tree warden? I'm wondering, I get a lot of questions about some of these bump outs where there's just grass and they say, couldn't we have perennials or shrubs or a tree? Or so it's kind of
so on the website there is the Watertown guide to the planting strip, and that has some information on what can and can't be planted. So there are some recommendations.
But I mean the ones that that DPW has managed. Versus just a homeowner, their own planting strip in front of them, like the new ones that have been installed.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Any planting?
I'm sorry. I was just wondering, like, are we tracking the additional green space that we're adding along with this? And
no, we're not. We're not tracking it in terms of the square footage of green space added. It seems like that would be kind of somewhat burdensome for us to do. We did discuss it in terms of our stormwater permit with EPA, whether it made sense, and we didn't feel that it was at that time.
Okay. And I don't think I saw it on this time. I know in the past we've had like short, medium, long term timeframes when it was kind of newer with the pavement management outlook or inventory, a general sense. Do we have like, is short term mean 3 to 5 years, medium? Do we have anything like that?
Right now, since we evaluate the road conditions on a yearly basis, we typically do not provide a short, medium, or long-term outlook for any particular street. We usually look based on road conditions. Everything just changes so much from year to year, particularly with the utility work that goes on. It's very difficult for us to come up with a time frame like that for particular streets.
Well, that's why I was curious when the 2020, like when it's going to be updated, since we don't have, special technology or trucks with sensors that map everything out, or drones, or, I mean, it sounds like we're still doing windshield and personal visuals. And
yeah, so all 72 plus or minus streets of town are inspected by visual survey as part of the pavement management plan update, and various metrics are taken, and then it's popped into the computer and comes out with a list by PCI. And again, the list is somewhat relative. A 20 versus a 21 is not really important. A 20 versus a 40 or 50 is.
okay.
But that, so the field work was done earlier this year. All the streets have been reviewed. We have gotten a draft review, but it has not been reviewed yet.
Oh, okay. And my last question is just, there's also a lot of complaints of potholes not holding, or, asphalt pebbles kind of, especially in winter or early spring. And I just throw out there's this product called Aqua Fault. And I know that Mass DOT, but other states have used it. I don't know if you guys know about it, but it's almost like concrete. And so that's just, throw that out there as a potential product that could be helpful.
Or I can certainly, can bring it to the highway supervisor's attention. I'm not personally familiar with the product. Potholes, they stink. There's no way to put it. In the freeze thaw, you do a pothole after the traffic and the freeze thaw, it comes back up. And where we have tons of, lots of potholes, we'll try and do a permanent patch, but there are potholes everywhere. But I would encourage, we always tell people, if you're going to call in or put in a work order for a pothole, be as specific as you can, give us an address. You can't just say Mount Auburn Street. We know that potholes on Mount Auburn Street, but for tracking and liability concerns, give us as much information as you can if you're going to put in a pothole request.
Yes, Irving Street is a good example of constant potholes between Arsenal or North Beacon but thank you very much. I know I took a lot of time. It's great to see your face, and I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. Andy?
Thanks, Vinny. Matt, good to see you. How you doing?
You too.
I'm hoping to cover complete streets, the complete streets aspect of this whole process. I was very happy to hear you mention complete streets so many times. That's very encouraging. So my understanding, I'm trying to reacquaint myself with the whole complete streets policy and process. So if you can help me, I just kind of want to sync up. So my understanding is one of the bigger components of the streets is the guidelines that they provide as to when to consider complete streets applications. And then there's also the working group that you mentioned that I think is supposed to meet twice a year to do reviews. But also, my understanding is that if the guidelines dictate a certain treatment, but there's an exception to that treatment, then the working group should review that. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, essentially. And in terms of working with the working group, so as part of our next steps, we do come up with concept plans. The concept plans are shared with the working group. And just to refresh people's memories, the working group include members of DPW, police, fire, bike ped committee, and planning. So they are reviewed. We try and give at least some background as to what's being proposed and why. And the complete streets working group is able to provide comments on that.
So you're formalizing that review process. So that's a formal expectation as part of this process, right? So
yes.
Okay. So a question though, in any of these projects, were there any deviations from what the guidelines would prescribe that would need to be reviewed by the group?
In my opinion, no. The comments that we've received from the Complete Streets Working Group have been minimal or have been complementary to the work that we're doing.
So you're saying there was already a review with the working group?
These streets have not been reviewed by the working group.
Okay.
The review happens after the town council approves the streets.
Okay, and as I asked before, so that's formally been, well, it has been scheduled, but there's an expectation that that's going to be scheduled then.
Well, as you're aware, as a member of the bike ped committee, it's a formal, informal thing. It's typically, particularly in the time of COVID, the information is sent out with an explanation. We certainly welcome comments and discussion, but we haven't had a formal working group yet. No.
Yeah, I mean, that could be done through Zoom, right?
It certainly could.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. What kind of bike treatments are being considered coming out of these priorities? Are there any bike lanes that are being considered, or?
So most of these streets are residential streets, and we would not be proposing bike lanes on them.
Okay. Waverly is not a candidate for this?
At this time, we don't expect to propose a bike lane on the section of Waverly Ave between Belmont Street and Orchard Street. No.
All right. And what was the process so does that follow the Complete Streets guidelines for that particular category of project?
I don't think I could be prepared to talk to that level of detail right now. As I noted, it hasn't been shared with the working group yet, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Once the town council reviews this list and once we have updated concepts for Waverly Ave, we will share.
All right. Thank you for this presentation, Matt. Hope to see you around again. All right. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Sandy. And just so people know, the only thing that we're making a recommendation on tonight is the 2021 road program, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7 streets: Alden, Sheldon, Hazel, Gertrude, Goldie, Elmwood, and Grandview. So this was not a posted meeting to discuss the design of Waverly Avenue. So that was just that was only included in the presentation as just a status update about where the design process is. So
All right. Thanks, Vinny. Thank you.
sure. Maria.
Unmute and start video. Good evening, everyone. How are you? It's good to see everyone and everybody looking so healthy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds great.
Couple of things. Thank you, Vinny, for clarifying about Waverly Ave because that immediately raised concerns. As you know, we're doing the bike ped plan, and one of the things that's been identified as a major hole in our alternative ways of commuting and moving around town are north-south roads, and Waverly is a perfect north-south road because it goes all the way from the river to into all the way into Belmont and ties into White Street and Trapello Road and Belmont roads, which are major east-west arterials for cyclists. So we really do need to take a very close look as we get in a little closer to the design of Waverly, what we're going to do. Given that I live around the corner from this section of Waverly, I'm very familiar with it. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion of why bike lanes may not fit on that section. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, and I don't know whether this is a separate process, but is there a separate process for sidewalks?
So no, we do not propose a list of sidewalk reconstruction to the town council to approve.
So Matt, is there then a different process that we follow for what sidewalks are, you know, how we evaluate the condition of the sidewalks and what sidewalks need to be worked on?
Yeah, that's evaluated. Again, it's windshield/walking surveys based on maintenance requests and other information we have.
Okay, so technically we're not really talking about the sidewalks at this meeting. Will there be a separate meeting to discuss sidewalk conditions or sidewalks that are being repaired or replaced?
I would defer to the transportation planner on that issue. I understand that she's performing a bike ped plan, and that would probably be the best avenue to discuss that further.
Okay.
Maria, maybe if I could just clarify. So this is this 2021 road construction project is for the loan order that the council's going to vote on to do this work. That memo that I shared earlier that showed the streets that had sort of mill and overlay repairs and sidewalk repairs, that's done out of sort of a separate sort of a maintenance funding and through the highway department just sort of keeps a track of, like, you know, where from a maintenance standpoint what needs to be temporarily patched and replaced separate from the road construction project. And, you know, that's, you know, whether they do that, I think the current process is that the highway department, you know, sort of knows where the bad areas are in terms of either roads with lots of potholes or sidewalks that are broken, or, you know, residents call to complain about you know,
It's
my
like,
sidewalk's got a trip hazard, could you come and fix it? And that's how the get on that list. But the council doesn't review that or make any recommendations. That's handled strictly as sort of a maintenance matter.
okay. So maybe as an aside, Vinny, we can have a discussion about how to provide input into that and help with the process. One of the things that you will be seeing as part of the bike ped plan is a clear focus on the condition of our sidewalks throughout the town and a way of managing and maintaining them that is, in conjunction with the maintenance that we do on the roads. So if this isn't the appropriate time to discuss it, that's fine. I was just trying to figure out what was the appropriate time and whether or not it would be part of this discussion, but
Yeah, that's really, and again, maybe, I know we do, the bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's really, sort of, the routine maintenance is, doesn't really have sort of the council review or input. And whether, do we need to do more? Do we need to identify more areas? I mean, perhaps yes, and certainly if you walk around town, there's some very bad sidewalks. But I'm not sure if that's going to come out of the pedestrian plan recommendations or if we need to, again, defer to Matt about how the highway department selects those things. But certainly, complaints from residents to councilors or to the DPW or from residents direct to the DPW help inform that. I don't know if we need to do something better to get input from residents on that, but maybe that's something we could talk about later in as part of how to improve pedestrian accommodations throughout the town. So
that would be fine, Vinny. I just want to make sure we have a discussion and a process for how to manage our sidewalks better.
yes.
It's more.
So I see Laura has her hand up. Maybe she can speak to that point.
Or a question, if you don't mind.
Sure, no, go ahead.
Lead over to Laura. One of the questions I had dealt with how we evaluate our roadways. I was wondering if, as part of the roadway evaluation, the right side of the road where most cyclists will ride, if the condition of that area of the road was also evaluated so that when we evaluate the road surface, we're looking at it both from a vehicle, from a car perspective and a cyclist perspective. Because often you will see that the right side of the road is in pretty bad shape as well. And sometimes the center part of the road is the part that gets the attention, but the right side of the road, where the gutters are and where you find a lot more trash and where you find sometimes a lot of pretty impressive potholes, may not make it or may not influence whether or not a road is included or whether or not that is more easily fixed. So I want to find out what is the criteria for evaluating the road condition and whether we're looking at it just from the driver perspective or we're adding also from the cyclist perspective.
The entire width of the road is considered when developing the road condition index. It's not just looked at the travel lane.
Okay. Matt, is there any way to evaluate the cyclist side of the road more? Because sometimes, as you know, where we have those drains, sometimes we have bad drains in that area. We'll have potholes next to the drains, or riding on the right side of the road becomes a pothole or bad condition avoidance, and cyclists have to lurch out into the middle of the road just to avoid some pretty significant potholes.
I certainly understand that. For the vast majority of the residential roads we're talking about, that's not really an issue. It could be an issue on some of the more collector or larger, longer streets that might be used, wider streets as well.
That would be great. I understand about, some of the more residential streets, I was just wondering if perhaps we could do something about the larger roads or the collectors to make sure we're evaluating both how does it look from a cyclist and how does it look from a driver perspective.
Understood.
Thank you very much. I'm done, Vin. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Hannah is next. Hannah, if you could just give us your last name.
Hi, Hannah Rakoff, 87 Spruce Street. I'm turning on my video. You should be able to see me now. So thank you for the presentation and for the opportunity to comment. Mostly, I just wanted to put in a general plea for curbs. I know the planning department, in a conversation with them this spring, said that they're really trying to get them included in new projects, but I haven't seen that in all the projects that went in this summer. For instance, I think Marcia Road, which was quite nicely redone, didn't get curbs. So I just wanted to put in a plea for them in general. There are a number of places where the sidewalks are not great, but they're okay. But you can't walk on them because house after house after house, they're parked except for, a foot. So essentially that's my comment, that I really want to put in a plea, and also for it to be really hefty curbs. I know the granite ones are really expensive, but they really do make a difference in terms of people parking on them or not parking on them. So.
Thank you. I do appreciate that comment, and it goes back to looking at the road surface as a pavement preservation versus a full reconstruction. Some streets that get mill and overlaid, we're not necessarily putting in curb. All the roads that the town council will be approving and approve as part of a road reconstruction project will include granite curbing and concrete sidewalks. But again, as we look at maintenance activities, our maintenance activities are more.
Okay.
Hannah, I'm sorry, for the notes, Hannah, I didn't catch your last name.
Rakoff, Rakoff.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Let's see. We had Laura. Lisa, did you want to speak again? Did you have your hand up second time?
I did.
Yeah, sorry, I just had one more thing.
Sure. Can we let?
I can wait.
Okay, so Laura would be next.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to respond to the question about sidewalks and relative to the bike and ped plan, which is we're getting very close to finishing, so we really have a good sense of what the recommendations are. And the recommendation on the sidewalks is to prioritize locations based on where they go. Obviously, condition is probably the first criteria, but to cross that with sidewalks that access transit, bus stops, senior housing, schools, recreational destinations, Manover Cemetery and the Charles River, and places where people would like to walk if they could, and the commercial districts even more so. So I think we're going to have to talk about how we use two criteria, not just one in the future, but that's really where they're going with that, the criteria for sidewalks in the future.
Okay, thank you. That's great. The next person is identified as biker.
That would be me, Vinny. That would be Sheila.
Oh, Sheila. Okay. Okay. So it's Sheila Fay. So
I don't know why it comes up just as Biker Faye. Sometimes it comes up as me, sometimes as Biker Faye.
Okay.
So my question has to do with Alden Road, because I actually happen to live on that road now. And Matt, my question is, why? Because really, in all honesty, yeah, it's okay. It's not in great shape, but there's a lot of other roads in town that need more work. And personally, maybe it's just me. I could live with it like this. Maybe it's a question of it deteriorating worse. But on a scale of things, I personally, as a resident, would say, we could live a few more years without having it redone.
I appreciate that feedback, and certainly I'm sure the subcommittee and council can consider that in terms of evaluating the recommendations.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. Great to hear from you. All right, so Lisa, you could, back to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as a follow-up, I have Alden Road residents who have been upset for years that it has not received attention since it was identified years ago as needing reconstruction, over 5 years ago. But anyway, I'm sorry, I forgot. My one question I get a lot is, we don't seem to have a plan, or is there a plan for roads getting washed away, if you will, from stormwater, a lot of degradation, and we don't have curbs there, et cetera, such as Bailey and parts of Russell, and up there off of Oakley Country Club in particular, there's a lot of washing out, if you will, and crumbling, and so I don't know if you can speak to that. I know that's not part of the potential vote or recommendation tonight, but I really appreciate you taking all these extra questions around roads and sidewalks.
So in terms of installing curbing, we follow the town ordinance for curb and sidewalk. We put in curbing on streets that get full reconstruction that we present to the council. We typically do not add curb willy-nilly throughout town, and we're certainly aware of washouts. We have that throughout town on all of our hills, but it becomes an issue of once you start putting curb in one area, then suddenly the whole street wants curb, or then, it becomes what we call an engineering scope creep. So we have found that the best way to handle it, which unfortunately is not so helpful for the residents, but is consistent town-wide, is to add curbing as part of a road reconstruction project. Certainly, if a resident is seeing washout of a border, they can always come in and they can always put in a work order to have the area reloamed and seeded. We can always put up do not park on the border signs, and on the hills, we're trying to get into the habit of including erosion control blankets to help get the grass established. But certainly that is an issue throughout town.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just in particular was talking about where it's an ongoing, it's not even necessarily just the planning strip. They're worried about the road sinking. And I'm just thinking, maintenance to prevent more expense later on. So I don't know if that's more of a stormwater management issue, but I just wanted to mention it.
Thanks.
Tony.
Thank you. I just a couple of quick questions. One, first, I appreciate Councilor Felton bringing up Russell Ave. I had long discussions with that resident and with DPW about that problem, and I understand that curbing can't be put in by hand because they feel it's not strong enough, and that you need a certain kind of machine that puts in asphalt curbing. But it is, as Matt said, it is a problem, and we do get a lot of calls on it. The other thing, though, I wanted to ask about the reference map mentioned sidewalk conditioning, a sidewalk condition map. What is that something you're going to start doing, creating a sidewalk condition map like you do for the roads?
Well, as part of our road survey, our consultant also has surveyed the sidewalk conditions. It's going to be very general, probably good, fair, poor, but it just will be another tool for us to use looking at sidewalks.
And have you done that already?
No, it's not complete.
But is it is it in the process?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And when do you see that coming out?
I don't have a date for that. It's being done coincidentally with the road audit, but since it's new, there's probably going to need to be more discussion before we have anything that would be considered deliverable.
And the new road order, that was going to be done by, is that, you did one in 2012, 2016. We're looking at one that would have been done if things had all worked out. It would be 2020.
Yeah, and so the road windshield survey was done in 2020, so the report will be indicative of the 4-year cycle, the report. But it as opposed to spring 2020, it might be fall or 2020 or winter 2021. So we have a final product.
Okay. And then just the last question, Vinny I forget actually what we passed in this last town council budget, the budget we passed, but did we have an additional 1.5 million for long roads, or did we not include that this past year?
Yes, we did.
So
that's for the Waverly Avenue extension, which authorized them to actually go ahead and start doing the design work.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
So, and if I could just close up, so we're going to make a motion in just one moment, but I just, for the people listening, just to go back we kicked off this new road project for the town council in 2009. Prior to 2009, the town of Watertown did not borrow any money for road construction. And we did not do any sidewalk repairs or curb repairs as part of the road projects. All we did was use our Chapter 90 money to do mill and overlays. That was it. No borrowing of money. And starting in 2009 with the two things happened. We issued a policy that all reconstructions of roads, we would repair or replace sidewalks, add curbs if there were no curbs. We wrote the curb and sidewalk ordinance requiring granite curbs and concrete sidewalks for all road reconstruction projects with full depth reconstruction. And we started borrowing, we came up with a plan to borrow $2.5 million a year starting in fiscal year 2009 to do that. And the first road we did was Palfrey Street. Some of the people on this call may remember what a challenge that was doing Palfrey Street. And it was really just a complete change in attitude that, Palfrey Street, for example, was asphalt from front yard to front yard. You couldn't tell where the sidewalk started and where the street began because it was just a sea of asphalt. And it was a lot of social challenge trying to get abutters to realize that, there's sidewalks for pedestrians, there's streets for cars. That's what we were going to do going forward, starting in 2009. We've made some astounding progress since 2009. We've made some astounding progress just since 2012. But there's a lot more to do. And I could wish we could do 2 or 3 times what we're doing every year, but there's just the logistics of doing this is very complicated. But we are making a tremendous effort, and I want to thank everybody. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee was instrumental in sort of developing this sidewalk and curb ordinance, and our adoption of the Complete Streets program sort of helped drive that along. So I'm excited. I'm excited about it. I just wish, honest to God, I just wish we could do more, but it's very complicated. So. So that being said, what I would like to do.
One last question.
Sure, Tony.
Yeah, I remember last year we were pretty excited about the fact that DPW was going to be able to merge these 2 efforts, the 2019 and the 2020. And as we see by Matt's presentation, a lot of those roads were done. There's still a few that are in process. There's a goal to try to get some done this year. Maybe it'll sneak into the spring of next year. I remember asking way back then when we looked at this too, it seemed like a lot. I said to myself, and I said it publicly, those are a lot of streets to do in 1 year. And it's clear that I would say that it looks like there's 65 to 70% of them are done, and that some will be completed in the next little while. Which leads me to the question, if we were able to do that many streets, why didn't we this year? And I should have asked this question way in the beginning, but I just remember the thought process I had. Why don't we do more streets this year? If we were able to take on that challenge last year to do, I don't know, I haven't counted them, but it was close to 15 streets. And you did it. I mean, you did a lot of them. And there's a few that are still being done. So does that experience tell us that, well, if we can do it one year, we could do it again? And I'm wondering why we're not doing more.
That Matt or
Well, kind of putting me in a tough spot to answer the question. Certainly, we're getting it done. Next year, we'll have these streets. We'll have Waverly Ave, and hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be talking about Mount Auburn Street a little bit more and other projects. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities to add more streets in, but as we noted, we recommend streets that fit within our budget guidelines, and so I would defer to council and the town manager on financial impacts, et cetera, of adding streets in.
Well, I think my point is, and I'll just put it quickly in the minutes as one of the many points made tonight, is that if you find yourself able to handle more streets, I would hope that the department would come back to the council, at least for consideration of more money. But I think this experience that we've had in the last year and a half proves that the department can handle a greater number of streets if they had the financial support to do more streets. I think that's what was proven by the 2019/2020 results. So I'll leave it at that.
That was my memory of the last meeting. It's more about money.
Yeah.
well, it's money, but also it's staff resources. It's great. We hired Kevin Duffy as a second engineer. We used to only have one engineer, now we have two, which has been great. And and now we find ourselves short-staffed a little bit again from a DPW management. But I think Tony, you're right. We managed to do 2 summers worth of road construction in one summer and make some tremendous progress. It's not completely done, but we've made some tremendous progress. So that's really a good sign. And I think going forward, depending on what the financial situation looks like, over the next couple of fiscal years, certainly, personally, I would like to spend more money on road projects because I think it's really sort of a fundamental responsibility of the town. So, but we need to balance that against the schools and everything else that goes on. So good point. Good point, Tony. You should definitely put that in the minutes. So anyway, what our role tonight is that I'd like a motion that this committee recommends to the full town council to approve proceeding with the 2020 run road program as presented tonight.
So moved.
Oh,
Okay, Tony, did you second that?
second, yes.
Okay.
Yes, second.
Okay, so that's the motion. We're gonna need a roll call vote. All in favor, Councilor Donato,
Yes.
Councilor Palumbo,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So that's unanimous. Thank you. So that's really it for tonight, Matt. I really want to thank you for you and Kevin and the others in the DPW for the tremendous amount of work you put into this. I know it's a lot. And so the next step is this is going to go in a committee report, and council is going to vote on it because we want to proceed with the ability to go out to bid. And our goal is to go out to bid in December so we can get good prices in January. So we found that is a very effective, cost-effective way to proceed. Any other questions before we adjourn?
Sorry, I just want to point out, and I mentioned it in, I believe in the email I sent out, that the presentation will be posted on our website tomorrow.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Anthony, Tony, you all set?
Motion to,
Yep.
yeah,
I'm all set.
motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Okay, second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, well, that's it.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. It was good.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Laura.
And
Thank
it
you,
was-
everybody.
And it was good seeing all the rest of you on Zoom. So take care.